Welcome back to the Pursuit Zone. This is episode 197 with Jelle Veyt, where we talk about his cycling and rowing adventure from Nepal to Indonesia to summit Carstensz pyramid. Jelle's been on the show before. He's on a mission to reach the 7 summits using only human power. Jelle first appeared in episode 133 to talk about his cycling from Belgium to Nepal and then summiting Everest. You'll find that episode at thepursuitzone.com/TPZ133. I'm Paul Schmid. I'm the host of this podcast, and I interview explorers from around the globe to bring you their exciting stories. These are people that dream big, break out of their comfort zones, and take on ambitious pursuits. Let's start the show, and let me introduce my guest. He is on a mission to use human power to reach the peaks of the 7 summits. After cycling to Nepal and summiting Mount Everest in 2016, he set out on a new adventure to reach the top of Carstensz pyramid, the highest peak of Mount Carstensz in the Papua province of Indonesia. He began on bicycle from Nepal, crossing India, Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, and ending 9,000 kilometers later in East Java, Indonesia. From there, he continued by rowboat, another 4,000 kilometers to Papua province. But because of local violence, he had to hitch a helicopter ride with a climbing expedition team to cover the final 70 kilometers. It was 2.5 years of training, preparing, cycling, and rowing to reach the summit. You can learn more about his adventures at his website, jelleveyt.be. Jelle Veyt, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Paul. Thank you.
How much time went by between the end of your Everest expedition in Nepal before you set out to begin cycling on this new adventure?
So after summiting Everest, that was in May 2016. I think in October 2016, I set off again on the next part of the adventure.
So about 5 months, and then did you use the same bike and the same setup that you did for the other adventure?
Yes, so my bicycle was still in Kathmandu, so everything was still there. There's a big difference in the setup because I didn't need that much equipment anymore. There's a lot of like downsuit or big mountaineering boots I didn't need for the next part of the trip, so they are still in Nepal actually. So I left it there, so I had a little bit of a lighter setup, but I still had the same thing with the trailer and the panniers.
For the cycle touring part, this 9,000 kilometers that you do, what's kind of the budget that you put together for that?
The budget for a cycle tour like that, I would estimate it in between $10 and $15 a day, roughly. I think it took about 2.5 months to 3 months. So that's about, say, $1,500 in total. Yeah.
Now, this time you are cycling with a friend, Benjamin. Now, tell me about Benjamin.
Yeah, he's already a longtime friend from Belgium. Yeah, we lived together for a while. I rented a room in his house because we were living together. I was planning my trip to Indonesia. He actually thought about doing the same because he thought, yeah, it's a great opportunity. I can do it with somebody else. So yeah, we actually decided then let's go for it together. It's not the most challenging route in the way that it's not very remote places. You don't have to do a lot of preparation because it's Southeast Asia. It's very well known for cycling and it's very accessible to people who actually never done something like that before.
So you set out from Kathmandu. Your first country is India. How long are you cycling in India?
I think it took us 2 or 3 weeks. We actually went to Nepal, to the southeast of Nepal. And there we entered Darjeeling, which is a little bit more remote area than the rest of India, I think, because it's like a stretch of India that is in between Nepal and Bangladesh, I think. And it's actually a very beautiful area. So that was actually a very nice place to cycle. And getting closer to the India border as well. I don't think many people go there to India. They mainly go to the biggest mainland of India. But for us to go to Myanmar, we actually went to the other provinces which are not much visited by tourists, which was a very nice experience.
So when you're in India, where are you sleeping each night?
It depends. The thing is, wild camping we actually almost never did, because there's so many people around and you want to be a little bit more relaxed when you're camping somewhere. But sometimes we just ask to people, can we pitch our tent somewhere? From time to time, we stayed in some kind of local guest houses or some kind of hotels. Mostly when we pitch up a tent, it's like you get up in the morning and there's like 20 or 30 people standing around at you and just staring at you. So that's why we try to avoid camping or wild camping anyway, too much.
How did you find the cycling to be there? Was it were there a lot of cars? Was it remote? What was it like?
There's still a lot of people. So it's let's say it's not because it's like a quite remote area of India that it's remote, but it's still a lot of people and they're all very friendly. And the thing is that especially India and a lot of other Southeastern countries, they love their selfies. So actually a lot of times people just try to stop us to take a selfie with us because it's not very common. They see like two white guys on a bicycle there. They just stop us, take a selfie and we continue, but really extremely friendly and the area was really beautiful. But it was almost always quite crowded.
You're several weeks in India. I'm assuming you guys are eating the local food. Do you like Indian food?
Yes. I love Indian food. That was always very nice to have. But we made a mistake one day for going for we wanted something high calories and we saw a chicken burger. And there we tried to eat it, but then the chicken was still raw on the inside. And that actually got us sick for a couple of days. And that was actually pretty bad.
Oh, that's no fun.
No, no. But it was a bit funny in the end. But first, it's just you want to cycle and you can't. And I think the first day that I was sick, I thought, I have malaria. You know, I was at night having some kind of fever. And we still needed to rush because we needed to get in time to the Myanmar border. So there was no time to say, let's stay for a couple of days and do nothing. So I still tried to push myself, but it wasn't very easy.
You push yourself on into Myanmar. So how does Myanmar change from India?
I'm not sure now, but I think the biggest change was they drive left in India and they drive right in Myanmar. It's like an isolated country where they suddenly drive the opposite side. So you need to remember that when you enter the country. I had that I missed a couple of times, so you need to be careful. But then on the other hand as well, the people are as well nice, but it's in a different way. In there, mostly when somebody from the village saw us, even adults, they had this very enthusiastic welcoming. And they just waved at us like children would wave and suddenly jump up. And it was so honest and sincere. I really loved that about the people there. The only problem in Myanmar was that the government didn't allow us to camp or stay at villages, at people's houses, and only at registered hotels. That was a downside about it because that's actually, you try to not spend too much of your budget. And then it's like, you can only go in this hotel. And sometimes we had to just continue cycling in the night to be able to find one because we went to a village. There the police said, no, you can't go. And then they followed us for 20 kilometers to the next hotel. So the government was less nice, but the people in the country were extremely lovely.
What kind of prices were you seeing on the hotels?
I can't say that now by heart, but it's about $15, let's say, for a night, which is already in most of the parts in Southeast Asia, the quality of the hotels compared to the price you give is pretty good, especially in Thailand. But there it wasn't really like that. And so they really tried to I don't know why they do it, but it was a bit difficult.
Plus that's your whole budget pretty much for just the room.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, so India was very crowded with people. What about Myanmar?
No, it wasn't crowded. There's less people around. Even certain places it's a bit more remote, which was actually lovely because you don't have too many cars. The roads are not that good always. But if you have situations like that, it actually makes things more beautiful as well. So you can really enjoy and not having to take care about cars or traffic.
And How long were you in Myanmar?
I think we were there as well about 3 weeks.
Do you find the food to be as good there? What was your experience like with the food?
Yeah, that was a more difficult thing actually in Myanmar. Sometimes finding the food was a bit difficult, or at least it was not very. We could always find food, but we found ourselves a bit more like villages were a bit further apart, and then finding people where we could buy a drink or buy some food. And actually in India, the food was much nicer in comparison to Myanmar. So I wouldn't go there for the food, but especially for the people and the welcoming of those people.
You cycle your way through Myanmar, and then next is Thailand. Of course, Thailand has a very good reputation with travelers and with cyclists. What was your experience in Thailand?
Yeah, the roads are perfect in the first place. It just very easy cycling. The food was always good. It took us maybe every hour we could stop somewhere if you wanted to have a cold drink and to have something to eat, which is luxury in some places in the world. And then we cycled through Bangkok, which was one of the craziest experiences because there it's just like all highways, and then there's like two madmen on a bicycle on these highways. And that's a downside because I've been to very crazy cities before, but mostly the roads are not that good or there's a lot of traffic. And in Bangkok, the cars can go very fast. They can drive 80 miles an hour or something like that. And then you're cycling in between them. And that makes it more crazy and then it makes you more vulnerable to, when you get hit, it's going to be bad.
Were you able to wild camp more in Thailand, or did you need to?
No, we actually never needed to. It's possible. You can do it, but mostly depends on the roads where you are. Mostly you can always ask some friendly villagers to do that. There's quite some people. Depends what region, but we actually went from North to South Thailand, which is quite the touristic places. And there we even had some friends where we could stay at and such. So it's a bit more open to tourists. And actually it was all very... It was quite easy to cycle through, to find accommodation, to sleep for free, that was actually quite easy to get along.
After Thailand, you're into Malaysia, which my impression of Malaysia is it's pretty modern. What was your cycling experience like in Malaysia?
It's indeed pretty modern, but it's a bit strange because they kind of have a lot of, I think, oil and gas, but there's some projects that are funded, let's say, and never got finished. So you can see abandoned buildings quite a lot. But as well, it's a little bit more industrial than Thailand. For me, Thailand was actually a bit more open for tourism, and Malaysia was as well nice, but I think more industrial or more business-minded, instead of Thailand is more open for tourists. That's the impression I had when I was cycling there.
Were you staying in hotels in Malaysia?
Sometimes, but mostly we just try to stay in some villages. And actually most of the time, even if we get some accommodation, it's just some guest house next to the road. That's like a homestay. And then the people just ask some money to stay in one of their empty rooms.
What's your favorite food in Malaysia?
Oh, in Malaysia, I don't know actually. For me, Thailand was always the most of the food source or the biggest variation and the most that I liked there.
What was your favorite food in Thailand?
In Thailand, it's, now I have to think about it. It's like the soup that is very spicy with seafood inside. But now I can't get to the name.
But your preference is for Thai food over Malaysian food?
Yeah, definitely. Because the same with Indonesian food, they have a lot of nasi goreng, and especially in the local places, it's just some fried rice, and that's it. So it's just white rice and it's fried, which is not always, it can be good one day, but not every day.
As we mentioned, you're cycling with your friend, and how does that change the trip for you? Are you enjoying it cycling with a friend? How is the trip going so far for you two now, thousands of kilometers into this? Are you still able to enjoy cycling together every day?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I can still enjoy it. It's nice that I'm able to share it because before you're always alone. You can't share anything. And I remember from the past, on one of the previous trips before this whole project, I cycled with my brother to south of France once. I remember then we still have the memories going up once in a while, And that's what I like now as well, to be sharing something. And it can be just for a month or 2 months, but then you're together and it helps you motivated, because if you feel not very motivated a certain day, the other one can help you, and the other way around.
The other side of the coin is sometimes the locals, they will approach you maybe less times because you're not by yourself, you're with someone else. Did you find that to be true?
Yes, I think indeed there's less interaction with the locals, because normally when I take a break and I'm just sitting somewhere having a drink or having something to eat, when you sit alone, you more tend to talk to locals because you want to have a conversation with somebody. And if you're already talking with two and you're in a conversation, then you're not likely to go out of that conversation and try to talk to somebody else. And even if you sometimes you hide together a bit, because sometimes you're sitting there and you don't want to do anything, and then you hide in a conversation, let's say. Indeed, I think there's less interaction with people, but it's not that there's no interaction, of course. You always have it, and that's a good thing about the cycling as well. You will always have it. Another good thing is that when we were the two of us, we split up twice during the trip, because for Benjamin, his goals, they were different. For me, it was to go human powered. And for him, it was more like a holiday and a nice adventure. That was actually as well from the start something like, okay, we're going to do this together. We will start together, finish together. It doesn't mean that we always have to be side by side. So a certain day, he went to an island to relax for a couple of days, and then took a train or bus where we would meet up. And I took a detour to do some rock climbing in the area.
Eventually, I think you're going to come to the end of the road in Malaysia. And do you have to get a ferry to get to Indonesia?
Yeah, so that was a bit of that's as well on the blog. That's one of the things I had to skip there, because I wanted to kayak the Malacca Strait, which was going from Malacca to Dumai. And in my preparation, I contacted a lot of people to do that, but nobody answered. And when I was there, I met some people who could help me, but not in that season. So then I had to make a decision to or continue to Indonesia and finish a trip with Benjamin while cycling, or just pause it and come back one other day to first kayak the strait. So I decided to continue the trip with Benjamin, obviously, and there we took a ferry to Indonesia. Yes.
What's it like cycling in Indonesia in the part that you are at?
It was tiring because, first of all, of the heat, but as well, it was always crowded as well. You're on island and there's so many people, and there's maybe one road going across that part of the island. So you're all on the same road, and it's not a big road, just one lane. And then you're cycling there and you're always afraid that people would hit you, and it goes always up and down. And it was actually not the most beautiful part of cycling. Not at all, actually, because there's always something going around. If you go to the side roads, it's all fine. But if you're on the main road going from point A to B and want to cross the island, it wasn't nice to be cycling, except when you take a break and you enjoy the view. But otherwise, you're actually focusing on the road and traffic.
So with all the people, then your wild camping options in Indonesia are limited. Are you staying in little guest houses?
Yeah, in Indonesia, we stayed mainly in guest houses or warm showers. It's like a couch surfing platform, but for cyclists. And then if you have contacts like that, you can find them and you can stay with them as well. But we never camped in Indonesia, or at least not that part of Indonesia.
So I think this is the point where the cycle adventure ends and you and Benjamin part ways, and now you're going to continue by rowboat through the Indonesian islands to Papua province, where you will take up cycling once again to cycle to Mount Carstensz. Let's go back and let's start at the beginning of the rowboat adventure. I guess the first thing is, this is something that requires a lot of planning before you get to this point. So how much planning did you put into this?
Quite a lot, because I didn't have a lot of experience. I just learned to row after climbing Everest, because I knew I needed to do that. I had a lot of friends helping me, or at least back then I didn't know them and I met them. And one of them was Koen, That's the guy who made the rowboat as well. And the planning, I think it took more than 6 months to plan everything. And it wasn't really easy to get things done there or to plan it. First of all, I needed to learn how to row, then to train physically for rowing, and get to know about the sea and the currents and the tides and everything, which was as well new for me. So I had to learn a lot in these 6 months and at the same time plan the whole trip. So it was quite intense.
So how do you learn how to row? What was that process like?
The first thing that I did actually after summiting Everest was I contacted one of my professors. I'm a physiotherapist, and one of my professors when I was at university, I knew he was a rower. I just contacted him because he was the only person I knew that was into rowing. So I contacted him and he just brought me in contact with a rowing club. And there one of the trainers actually, he just gave me private lessons. And it was all included in the fee of the membership. So I was really happy about it because they were actually quite convinced about my project. They really thought it was nice, very supportive. So I got some private lessons, and I think the first times in the rowboat, they're smaller rowboats, they're very, very thin. I think I fell in the water 3 times or 4 times, which is a very normal thing to do. You learn to swim immediately. And then on the sea, I contacted the Sea Rowing Club in Belgium, and there we went on the sea as well a couple of times. And it's quite a technical sport because you use your legs and your arms, so you use a whole body, and it needs to be well coordinated and extremely well in your technique. Otherwise, you risk having injuries, especially if you row every day for more than 10 hours.
Is all of your training then in a rowboat, or do you do training like weight training and training on a rowing machine?
Mostly I do it in a rowboat, or I tried to do that as much as possible. But I do weight training as well, and especially being a physio, I'm specialized in sports injury prevention. So I do exercises as well to prevent injuries for certain sports that I will be doing. Yeah, when the water is frozen, because here in Belgium winter it freezes, of course, and then it's all on a rowing machine.
The next step, I think, is you need to get a boat. How do you go about finding a boat to use on this adventure?
That was not easy at first, and I was very naive and foolish, let's say, because I thought, I was looking on the internet just like, oh yeah, I'm going to row to Papua, you know. I thought it was all going to be easy at first, just after Everest. And then I'm looking on the internet, I saw some kind of building packages you can order online to make a rowboat, and you can go on sea with it. And I thought, yeah, I'm just going to order that, have it shipped to Indonesia, to an address that I know, and then build a boat and do that. But I'm happy I didn't do that. So I actually met Koen, is the owner of Whaleboat, and he's actually making rowboats for the sea. He's the president of the rowing club, for the Sea Rowing Club in Belgium. I went to him and I told him my plans, and he said, like, if you do that, you're probably going to die. So he made me aware of taking the risks with the building package I would order online. And then actually he and one of my sponsors, they started to talk, to have some conversation. And so the sponsor, they bought one of his boats. It's a rowboat, specially made for the sea. And this one got shipped to Indonesia in the end.
Part of this rowing adventure, you are joined by other rowers. Was it your initial plan to go solo, or from the beginning did you plan to have rowing partners? Initially,
I think at the first start, I thought I will do this solo. But then later, I realized that I make these plans, and already in the past 7 years, I had to change things and realize that I was naive a couple of years ago in making some of the plans. So in this was the same. I just want to buy this package to get this boat and then row. I thought, yeah, it's gonna be easy, but then I realized it wasn't. And then my friend who made the boat, Koen, he said, yeah, in this boat you can row with 2 people. And then I was actually trying to find some partners. And then I met some people, and actually I'm very happy that I didn't do it solo. 2 months of it I did solo, 4 months of it in total I was with other people, and I'm really happy I did it that way.
Does that mean the total journey by rowboat was 6 months, 4 months with people and 2 months solo?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Can we talk about the boat just for a few minutes? Can you describe it? Can you tell us basically the dimensions of it, the weight maybe, and what material it's made of?
The boat is actually custom made. Koen has built, or he has built it in 4 months, and he works on it every day full time. So it's quite intensive to make some boat like that, and it's made out of this one especially. Normally he makes them in carbon fiber, but this one is made from jute. It's some kind of plant fiber with a epoxy resin and some recycled plastic bottles foam in the inside. So there's an outer shell and an inner shell, and in between there's like some recycled plastic foam inside to help the flotation as well. There's some compartments in there that can stow away quite some stuff, but as well I had like a very big pelly case that's completely waterproof attached to the boat to get more stuff, because you need to get food for a couple of days. The boat itself has sliding seats, which helps so you can use the legs more to push. It's about 6 meter 90, so 7 meter. It weighs about 200 kilograms.
So you begin to set off on the rowing adventure, and I believe the first person to join you was a guy named Malcolm from Australia. You guys go from Java to Bali to Lombok to Sumbawa. First of all, tell me about Malcolm. How did you find this person?
So Brian, that's another friend. He's Australian. I climbed Everest with him. And he took a group of friends with him that time to Everest Base Camp. And Malcolm was in that group. So we met there. And Malcolm is a 55-year-old guy at that moment. Ex-military, adventurous guy. A bit like Brian. And he's like, yeah, I got time now because he was retired. And he loves sea kayaking. He's always doing a lot of adventure. He swam the English Channel. So he's a very experienced guy. And he was actually totally up to come with me. So he took a flight, and the first 3 weeks we rode together from Java to Sumbawa and across the islands. And that was actually a very good opportunity for me to be with somebody who has that experience on the ocean. It helped me a lot to learn as well for the next part.
How was the rowing during those first 3 weeks? Was it a good introduction to rowing for you, or was it very difficult?
The first day was really difficult. When we left Java, I remember, so the strait between Java and Bali, we needed to get out of there. And the currents were so against us, it actually took us a very hard time to get out of it. Mostly a ferry takes about 45 minutes to do the 2-kilometer traverse because of the currents. So that's pretty strong, and that was a very hard day to cross it. But after that, everything went fine. We had some currents and winds with us, and we had a really nice time. It was hard because that was the first experience as well for me, being so long on the open sea. I can adapt pretty easily to situations like that. But the hardest part was actually the heat, the constant heat. If you're on the water, especially in a rowboat like that, there's no shade. So you're always in the sun, in the heat. And that was actually the most difficult part, because sometimes it got more than 50 degrees Celsius.
Are you starting to have problems with your stomach at this point? I know I was reading through your blog, and sometimes you were starting to vomit like when the sun came up.
At the point with Mel, I didn't have it. So we always rode in the daytime. And the biggest crossing we did there was the Lombok Strait, which has quite a nasty reputation amongst sailors as well because of the currents there. So we were a bit stressed to do that, or not stressed, but well prepared as well. And actually everything went perfect. We were really tired, but then afterwards we could easily continue and things like that. So in that part, I didn't have problems with the stomach. And that was the first 3 weeks with Mel. Everything went pretty well. The problems with the stomach were mostly on occasions indeed when the sun came up after a whole night of rowing. And I think it had something to do with the new, in the night I had no problem, and then suddenly the sun comes up and then I had to vomit. One of the problems is when you're rowing, if you stop to row, you're always moving. And the currents there can be against you, can be with you. and sometimes it can come from different directions. Mostly when I vomited, I just had to vomit and continue rowing immediately, which was pretty hard, and sometimes it happened 4 or 5 times, and then mostly I was fine again to continue the whole day of rowing again.
When you guys pull onto an island with your boat, what happens next? I mean, where do you guys sleep at night?
Yeah, that was always a bit sketchy, especially when I was alone, but with Mal, it was okay. Most of the time we were quite protected from incoming waves. If not, the first thing we did was, there's a different plans we did. Mostly, for example, one time Mal just jumped out of the water, swam to the shore across the breaking waves, which is a bit dangerous, of course. Tried to get some help from people. I'm just waiting in the boat, and then we wait for some people to quickly help pull the boat to land on the beach. Then it's all about planning and about timing, how to avoid the breaking waves. So you see that when they break, and you really need to be very careful and just start to row whenever you need to, and not row when you don't have to, because it's a very tricky thing. And then mostly on the land, we just slept in our tent, or I had some hammocks with me, and when it wasn't raining, we slept in the hammocks because it's so much cooler at night. In the tent, you're just sweating all the time because the sun is on the beach all the day. We just tried to find a tree and then sleep in the hammock with some mosquito net around it. We had some things to cook and everything. So yeah, that was actually nice. I was always wild camping, and yeah, I just loved it there, being in Indonesia, pretty relaxed.
Getting back to another question about a boat related, I guess, is what kind of oars are you using?
Yeah, they're oars. I think they're 3 meters long. They're from Concept. They're carbon fiber as well. They have pretty big blades, which has some down effect or some downside, because if you want to take them out of the water, and it's easier that a wave catches the blade again, so it just smashes again in the water. But if you have some experience in rowing, and actually most people, even experienced rowers, had it several times that it would get hit in the water, but after one or 2 days, everybody got used to it. I prefer the big blades in that you get a lot more surface on your oars to be rowing with.
After 3 weeks, Malcolm leaves, and then Koen comes down to join you and another guy, Gerhard from the Netherlands. You do some bigger crossings during that stretch, I think. You have a 90-kilometer, which takes you 16 hours. What do you remember from that time with those guys?
So when Gerhard and Koen came, the first day the first couple of days that Koen arrived in Indonesia, he got very sick. He probably got dengue. So he got to the island, and he took a road to the other side of the island where we would wind up in the end. So Gerhard and I, we were rowing together the first couple of days while Koen was recovering from his dengue. That first day I was rowing with Gerhard, we capsized because of some breaking waves. Like I just said before, you need to have good timing, and everything felt very good, very relaxed. Everything went good, and then suddenly we want to go to land, and we capsize, and there was like a reef break, like 500 meters from the beach, and the boat got stuck because the anchor got pulled out, got stuck in the reef. So it was a bit of a mess, and because of this situation, yeah, we got warned to be very careful, because you're already for a couple of months rowing, everything goes fine, and you kind of relax things down. And then it reminded me, like, no, always be cautious. And then on the bigger crossings, we decided as well, always we will go at night, because first of all, it's less warm, so you're not rowing in the heat of the sun. And on the other hand, it gives you a better opportunity to arrive while it's daylight. So when you row the whole night, when it's 16 hours of rowing, and you leave at 7 or 8 p.m., and when you arrive 16 hours later, you still have quite a reserve to still arrive when there's enough daylight. So we always calculated that, because you want to see where there's breaking waves near the shore, or other places where there could be crocodiles or rocks or anything else to be hitting. So you want to have good visibility. But it was actually pretty fun to be rowing with them, because you just especially on the bigger crossing, it's night, and time actually flies a bit when you're doing that. For me, at least, I was more getting into certain zone. You can't see anything. You just see the stars around you. And on certain occasions as well, there were some algae. When you hit the water, they just sparkle up from the sea. So that was always very magical moments to be rowing at night. And when you're with other people and you can share it, actually it was very special to me.
Do you, for example, listen to music when you're rowing, or do you need to be able to stay in communication with your rowing partner?
We are pretty close by, so we're on the same boat. So the thing is, sometimes we turn on the music. Yeah. So I had a small speaker with me that was waterproof, and was from time to time we just hit some music, and it helps as well to get into a certain zone and to pass the time. So we did that as well several times. You can easily turn it off when you need to say something, or when you see a ship coming or anything else. Then you just turn it off. Besides that, it was really helpful to have some music, actually.
So what are you listening to?
Mostly I like the old rock, let's say, like Led Zeppelin and music like that. Beastie Boys, mostly like older music we're listening to. And I'm really lucky that almost everybody that was with me on the boat loved the same music. So that was good.
Okay, after the section with these guys, I have in my notes here that you're joined by a guy named Mark.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this is a pretty nice stretch because you didn't have any big crossings.
Indeed. Yeah, that was a nice stretch. It was a bit difficult because there was some current against us, but there was always land we were following. And even the better part was that we were in between two islands. So we were quite protected from the incoming waves. So the current was maybe a bit against us, but at least we didn't have to stress about getting hit by waves or being too long on the sea. So we could take a day of less than 50 kilometers and just relax. So we didn't always have to push it. When we were tired, we could just stay somewhere, go to land, and the next day just slowly continue.
What do you have to do to protect your skin? Because you're constantly getting exposed to the salt water, and I would think the salt would start to be a little like sandpaper. How do you take care of your skin when you're out there?
Yeah, that's sometimes difficult. I got used to it. Yeah, you really need to take care of things. I use a lot of sunscreen, or I try to cover up at least. But on the other hand, the more you cover up, the more things rub, especially under your armpits. So you try to avoid wearing long sleeves, but then I had a big hat to protect my face from the sun and a bit more my body. But then as well, I tried not to get wet too much. So sometimes I got in the sea, but then first I wanted to try things out. Because if you start to rowing when you're wet, it's rubbing as well. And sometimes even rowing naked, or just in underpants. That helps as well for rubbing problems. And another thing is, every small scratch you have from a mosquito bite or any small thing, the most important thing was always to take very good care of it. Because I have seen people getting infected wounds and they don't heal very good in environments like that. So even the smallest wound, I always took very care of it and very thoroughly, because it can create a big problem if you don't.
This is around the time you have a big crossing, which I believe you try to do solo, 120 kilometers. And after 35 hours of rowing, you're starting to hallucinate. And so you have to call for help to be towed into shore. Tell me about that experience.
That was, a very special experience. So, I decided to do that solo because nobody wanted or could go along with me. And then I said, I can do it alone. And indeed, it was, a very crazy experience. I think one of the hardest things I've done in my life, because I thought it will be fine. The weather conditions were nice, but not perfect. And one of the things is, you don't know anything about the currents. I'm the first person to do that, human powered. And then you're like, how are the currents? You don't know anything. And I remember seeing the island 16 kilometers away from me. I was vomiting a lot there because I had some water that came from a well, but there was some kind of lobster in it. The locals were growing something inside there, I think. So the water was not good. And then I started to hallucinate. For example, in my memory, I wasn't alone on the boat, but I was for sure alone. But in my memory, I wasn't. There were other people. At the same time as well, I remember that a certain time I thought I was in a bay, well-protected bay, and I could take a rest, which I knew it wasn't right. I could see land certain places, and I thought, that's impossible, that there's land. Because of all the preparation I've done, I still knew my mind was tricking me. And then when I saw the land, which I was sure that was the land, and that was true as well, from then on, the tide started to turn against me. Then I calculated how fast I was going. And I felt like if I go at this pace, it's going to take me another 8 hours with non-stop rowing to get there. But when you're already 35 hours awake and rowing and hallucinating, I knew, this is not going to be a good idea to continue. So actually had sent my girlfriend a message on my satellite tracker to ask if you find a fisherman in the area who could maybe tow me in. Yeah, you can always do. She already knew that, because I said, but it's fine. There's no problem or anything. But she already knew that if I would say something like that, there's probably something bigger coming up that is not right. Then she started to find something in the end.
You get pulled into shore, and my understanding is that you kind of realize that you're not well and that you need to take a break from this adventure. So you go back to Belgium and you rest up for 4 months. You get somebody to take care of the boat while you're gone. Then you return for the final phase, and this time you're joined by a guy named George from England. How did you find George?
Well, actually, my girlfriend, so after the crossing where I got towed to land, she got a bit scared, which I understand. Like, he's alone, he still needs to do this stretch. But actually, after being towed, I had myself dropped off at the exact same point where they towed me away from, which didn't make my girlfriend and family very happy because they thought I was crazy. But I just wanted to do the whole thing. And then she started to look for other rowers, and she actually contacted people who she knew were rowing all around the world. And then George was like, he just finished university, I think. And he was like, I have time, I want to come rowing. And he's been a professional rower. He actually signed up to come along with me, and that was really nice because, after the crossing where I got towed away, I still had I rode for a week or two on my own, and then there from one island, there was George to join me.
And I think the idea is George is going to join you. I think at this point you still have 1,000 kilometers left to reach Carstensz Pyramid, and the plan is he's going to go most of the way with you. How much of the journey, when you meet up with George, how much of the journey of rowing remains, distance-wise?
I think it was about 600 kilometers. It was almost a 4,000-kilometer row from Java to Papua. And then the last, maybe 500 or 600 kilometers, or even a bit less, we did together.
So 500 or 600 kilometers you're rowing with George. What do you remember about that phase? Were there any big challenging crossings? Yeah,
there was still one crossing, about 75 or 90 kilometer crossing to Misul. That's the start of Raja Ampat, and that's like a diving paradise. A lot of people who dive, they will know Raja Ampat because that's like the place to go apparently for diving. So we had this big stretch to cross. That went pretty well, except for some thunderstorms we got along the way. That was pretty scary. Some certain times I had to tell, like, okay, now we stop with rowing for half an hour because we were getting too close to thunderstorms, and it's at night and you don't see where they're coming from and where they're going. And being out on the sea in a rowboat and there you see lightning and everything, you're not feeling very, very confident anymore. But you're there, so you have to take care. And then after that, the rowing was actually amazing. So after the crossing there into Raja Ampat, that was very special because it's all well protected from incoming waves, and there's a lot of small islands. So that was very easy to be going from one island to the other. There were no big crossings anymore. It was pretty easy to find how the currents were going there. It's a very complicated place, but because there's more people diving, you can actually ask the dive instructors and such how the currents are going. Once you get that, you can make your rowing a lot more easier to go along with the current. This Misul, is that on Papua province or is that its own island? It's an own island, but I think it's part of the Papua province itself. So the whole Raja Ampat area is from the Papua province. Okay, so you still have to make a crossing from there to the Papua province or the main
the mainland. What is that distance?
Yeah. The furthest there was maybe 30 kilometers. So there were a lot of small islands. And then the furthest crossing was 30 kilometers to another big island. And then we could follow that for a long way. And then the last part was 10 kilometers to Sorong, where's like the main harbor for the Papua province.
And so you guys make it there. And what happens next? How much time goes by, or how many rest days do you take before you begin cycling?
Not that many, actually. Just I think we arrived there. And immediately I started to find a way or a place to store the boat for that time and to find bicycles. And I think after 2 or 3 days, we left in the jungle by bicycle.
And how difficult was it to find bicycles and find equipment?
Surprisingly, finding a bicycle was not difficult. But I had some contacts already from there. I think I cycled and rode the most of the part of Indonesia, so it gives you a lot of contacts. In Sorong, in the biggest city, I think, in Papua province, there was a cycling community. And because of some contacts who knew somebody, we actually found some bicycles, and they were pretty decent, those bicycles. The only problem was the equipment to carry our loads with us. There was nothing to find, so we didn't find any rack that was decent. We didn't find any decent bag, so in the end I just winded up to tie the dry bags to my bike. The rack that I had on my bicycle, it broke after 2 days. It wasn't repairable. We had to be creative a lot of times when we were in Papua with our bicycles. We had to do a lot of repairs on it, mainly because of the weight of our bags.
What are the cycling conditions there?
The cycling conditions are quite horrendous, but as well extremely nice, because I was cycling there and I thought if I would have a decent bike, I would just absolutely love it. And I think a lot of people would do that, like especially bikepackers. I think this is a real place, an extremely nice place to go and to cycle, because it's like the first part was a little bit of asphalt. You can't even find the road on Google Maps. There's not a real road. So you really need to find your own things. And some of them is just like mud to almost up to your knees. We had to go through mud. And other times it's like more gravel, but it's always up and downhill. So there's no flat parts. It's always very challenging terrain. And the roads, they vary from really, really bad to quite good. So it's been a very nice place. And for me as well, I've been cycling for rowing for a long time along the islands of Indonesia. And you always see like the beach and maybe the first part of the jungle, and that's it, because you never go away from your boat. And then suddenly I could go deeper into the island, which was for me as well, it was amazing to discover this place.
You guys are cycling along, and eventually it starts to become clear to you that there's some sort of violent situation going on there with maybe, I don't know exactly, some sort of separatist groups or battling with the government forces, and people are dying. At what point do you realize, this is not safe for me to travel anymore?
I already knew from the conflicts and all the separatist groups, and I read and heard a lot of stories as well about these things. And then, we were cycling, and then suddenly I hear indeed, that was in a village we heard about it. And I speak some Indonesian, but it's not my best Indonesian, of course. And somebody tells us that 30 soldiers were executed in a field in the mountains by the separatists. And we actually felt a panic in the village, or the fear of them. There we had something like, okay, let's be very careful now, but there was no other way we might have been able to try and hitch a ride if a jeep passed by, which wasn't always the case, of course, but that happens sometimes. But then we thought, let's just continue until we can. And then George had his flight already back near the shoreline, so I actually went deeper into land and into the mountains where there's more activity of the separatists. A lot of people warned me, and So actually from pretty early on the island, we knew it was dangerous because I think the second or third day we were cycling, a car stops and he says, "Don't continue. It's dangerous there." And we thought, yeah, there's something happening a bit higher up. And we thought, yeah, let's just wait until there's something else coming. And then we actually continued and there was nothing going on. I think people are indeed afraid. Several times as well, a small village that they see us and the children and the grandmother, they just run away as fast as possible in the jungle, for example, carrying a machete. So that means that in most parts in Indonesia, people are very welcoming. But if they're afraid like that, it has a reason why they're afraid like that, and it means there's something going on. So it made us very aware and very cautious. I knew as long as there are people around, and I've seen a lot of Papuans, and they were actually, I really love those people. They were actually the way they act and interact with me, I just loved it. And most of them, on the other hand, I thought if there would be rebels trying to get me, there's not a big chance they would do something at me because they fight for independence and they care how international society or all the other countries are looking at them. Because if they would do something to me and they kill me, they lose their struggle immediately. So that was kind of a comforting thing I could tell myself, that they probably won't hurt me, because a lot of Westerns or Europeans, they feel with them because they think like, okay, their land has been taken and now they want to be free. They don't agree that they kill people, of course, but they can understand their cause.
So eventually you make the decision to stop cycling because of the danger. And how do you manage to find this expedition team and get on this helicopter?
To go to Papua, you need a special permit. So if you want to go to Papua, you need a permit. But then if you want to travel in Papua, you need another permit. We got this permit because the head of the police in Sorong was a cyclist himself. So we got a special, we were very lucky. And we were the first people to cycle there. And my whole story was like, okay, this is correct. And that helped to get the good connections. Even Human Rights Watch actually contacted me after the expedition to know how I got on the island and was able to travel freely on the island, because they were surprised. They were trying that already many years to do that. And then in Enarotali itself, the police stopped me. And there I knew, I'm not going to try and push it, because if I would continue here, they might arrest me. And there I stopped. But to get my first permits and as well to go to the mountain, for all the administration there, you need to be with the expedition. And that was already arranged, the expedition there, to get my permits. So I was stopped in Enarotali, and then I thought, I can't continue anymore. I have the permits, because you need to pay for it, of course. You need to go with the expedition. And then there was the option, but they will fly over by helicopter from a certain city to the mountain, to the base camp. And then that was like, okay, I can do that. Or I can just go back and do nothing. Then I thought, it's 70 kilometers, something like that I need to cross by helicopter then. That's fine. I did everything I could to reach the mountain. I even rode, I think, 1,000 kilometers extra and cycled through Papua to try and get there. I did all that, a lot of things extra to be able to find it, or to find a route there, which in the end I couldn't because of politics. I told the expedition, I'm going with you on the helicopter. And I could do that. So,
Did you have to cycle back to where the helicopter was taking off from, or did the helicopter land where you were and pick you up?
No, I cycled back down. So in Enarotali, I cycled back to Nabire. And then from there, because the helicopter of the expedition, they were going to do that anyway. So they actually already flew to Timika, which was on the other side of the island. So I actually flew to Timika, and from there I took the helicopter across to base camp. That means that I took some kind of detour by flying there, but the whole resulting part that I didn't do was from Enarotali to the mountain. That was the closest place I could get. And I'm actually still looking at the situation regularly to see if there might be a chance one day to be crossing that part of jungle to the mountain and finish it like completely. And then at the same time, while I'm there, I want to kayak the Malacca Strait, which I skipped as well. In that way, I will have linked the whole thing human-powered.
After 3 to 4 hours of climbing, you reached the summit. What was that moment like for you?
Yeah, that was a very emotional moment. I think even more emotional than being on Everest. Because, yeah, the climb is really beautiful, but Everest was as well. But actually, because the amount of time and effort that I've put to get to that point, that was so big, so huge, much more than I had to do for Everest or any other thing that I did in my life, was so immense. And that actually just suddenly was like, okay, now I've made it. Because I already could find the peace of taking that helicopter ride in my mind. And I thought, okay, now I've made it. I've done everything I could to get here, and now I did it. So yeah, I think the first 10 minutes I was on the summit. So we were climbing with a couple of people, and then the last part was a bit easy on a ridge. So I took up the speed a bit. So I left my climbing partners, let's say, they were independent enough. Because I knew, the first part, I just want to be alone, because this is going to be a very intense and emotional moment for me to be there.
What about the adventure are you most proud of?
Well, I think actually rowing to Papua, because I'm the first person ever to do that. And it hasn't been easy. It has been extremely bad, extremely hard, but that makes it that it's just something, it was worth it as well. And it's not as acknowledged, because sometimes people say, oh yeah, you're gonna row the ocean, which is difficult as well. The thing is that when you're the first one to do something, people don't know what it's like. And I know from very experienced rowers who have more respect to what I did there than if I would cross the ocean while rowing, because they know where the differences are and where the difficulties are in comparison to doing other things that maybe a lot of people already did. So for me, that's the most part that I'm proud of is the rowing to Papua.
Well, congratulations, Jelle, on finishing that adventure.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I know that some of when you are out there traveling, you're trying to meet local people and local organizations that are trying to help with the environment or help educate the local population about how to treat the environment better and things like that. So maybe we can talk about some of these organizations that you met along the way. Not all of these are from the Indonesia trip. Some of these are from your most recent adventure, cycling through Africa to reach Kilimanjaro. But maybe let's start with this Surf Rider Maroc Foundation, an organization that works to educate, inform, and clean up pollution. What can you tell me about them? It's
an organization in Morocco, in Rabat, I think it was. I actually went to visit them. No, in Agadir, sorry. So I went to visit them, and it's actually a part of a bigger organization, and it's a Surf Rider Foundation. And they try to make people aware about how important it is not to throw, first of all, plastics or any other waste in the ocean. And it actually started from a group of surfers. That's how the big problem everywhere in the oceans. And now they try to as well incorporate that in companies, in businesses, and try to interact with local communities. So they go from school to school, trying to talk and to convince children as well, not just to throw away garbage. Actually, they used to tell to me as a kid as well that you throw your stuff in the garbage bin. And that's what they're trying to do now in all different systems. So in Morocco, you see a lot of places where it's full of garbage. They're trying to counteract that by informing people and motivating them not to do it. And as well, they do it with businesses and local governments. So they really try to get their influence on different levels in society. And that's something I've seen as well in Indonesia, the importance of it. When I was rowing in Indonesia, I've seen a lot of stuff, for example, uninhabited islands where the beaches are full of plastic, and that's just because of the ocean currents just drop it there. And so, yeah, since then, I thought about helping and visiting, first in the first hand visiting, and then helping them as well to fight for their cause, because I really think it's an important thing we need to do in the world.
Yeah, there's another organization here in Senegal, senesurfdk.com. It's like a local restaurant that's trying to help keep the beaches clean. I think you visited them. What can you tell us about them?
It's already an old restaurant that's on the beach, The son of it is now, I think, he's got the same age as me maybe, and he took over the place, and since then he's like a very dedicated guy, just doing on a simple way what you see more and more coming. It's the same like the Surfrider Maroc Foundation. He cleans up the beaches there, he organizes this, but the problem there, even more in Morocco, it's a bit similar, but even more there, he doesn't get taken seriously. So he cleans up the beaches, his whole restaurant and surf shop, because he's now like it's a small beach, people can surf there. He's very passionate and dedicated, and it's not only about profit. Of course, it's a restaurant and a cafe. They want to have some profit, but it's a very basic place because they need to live as well. But it's not just that. So they have collection of waste from a special company. So they do the collection of waste. They have to pay for that because it's not the government who is doing that there. And they do everything responsibly. They don't even have any waste themselves. So it's a completely waste-free little restaurant and bar. And every year they're going into more and more extreme things to get their costs covered. Like a couple of years ago, they still had some bottles that they were selling. Now they don't sell any bottles. They just have filtered water and you can fill up your bottle, or they give you a glass to drink. And it's all these small things that they're doing, which is great. And when I visited, I just saw that the passion that this guy had to keep his beach clean, and he's actually trying now to spread it along that. So with other restaurants or bars that are around, he's just trying to make people aware there. And that's a very difficult thing, because in places like that, people don't take you seriously when you start to do that. And I think it's very courageous to do that, in a situation like that.
Also in Africa, there was an organization called Solar Sisters who are investing in women's rural communities with sustainable products like solar panels. Tell us about Solar Sisters.
It's a US initiative from the United States. So they try to help women to start a business, but it's actually a sustainable business. So this is not just about charity, giving people some money and then getting out of there and then they have nothing left. So they really try to educate people, mainly women, how to start up a business that is sustainable, and they can maybe live because of that. But it's not just sustainable for them, it's as well sustainable for the environment. So the products they sell then will only be sustainable products. And that's mainly solar panels or lights that work with solar panels. So they can charge phones or even just some lights. And they mainly go and teach the women there in very remote areas. If there is no electricity from the government, that's the areas they will go to, because people need light. Especially in Nigeria, for example, I've been cycling through it. The risk of kidnapping is pretty big over there. Was for me as well a main concern. People just kidnap other people for ransoms. They want to earn some money, they kidnap someone. So, and actually with this light, they can sometimes prevent it, because mostly when they kidnap somebody, it can be somebody from another village, but they can be recognized. And if there's light, people are less likely to be kidnapped. And in that, they really try to incorporate then the light. And that's why they call it the Solar Sisters, to bring light in these communities. And it's in different African countries they're doing that. I've visited one of their meetings, and it's all women from different villages. They come together and they get taught about how to run their business and how to sell it. And it's a non-profit organization for the organization itself, but the women who are educated and then sell their products, of course, they earn some money with it, and they can maybe provide their family with some extra income. But it's not the organization that will make profit out of that.
In the island of Sumbawa, Indonesia, you met a guy, Wahyu Di Uden, an Indonesian English teacher and environmental activist. What do you remember about meeting him?
That was very coincidentally as well. I was with my girlfriend, we were rowing and camping, and then suddenly there's like, the whole village comes to us, and there's one guy talking English. And he's like a voluntary English teacher. He lives in the village, he speaks English, because mainly once in a while he saw some tourists. I think because of that, the tourists that he saw probably told like, yeah, but you shouldn't throw the garbage out at the sea, or you shouldn't do it with that. And he got aware of that. And just because it's the same thing, his local community doesn't take him very seriously. So they think like, yeah, it's just doing nothing. It's not important. But actually, he's teaching the children in the afternoon English classes. And in return, they need to clean up the beaches. And while cleaning up, they can make some games with it. And they do different things with the garbage now. So they make some jewelries, they make some arts with it. So it's very nice to see on a small island like that, and actually just without any incentive, financially or otherwise, he just thinks it's the right thing to do. He's doing that. And it just, I love it to see that, because there's nobody else watching him to say, you should do this or that. He's just like convinced out of his own motivation that this is the right thing to do. And that's something that really attracted me. And then since last year with one of my sponsors, Viamundo, they are supporting him and trying to help him to have this as a sustainable project so that he can do this maybe for the rest of his life in a way that he's taken seriously by the local government, by the people there. And as well, maybe he can find a way to get some income out of it while keeping the beaches clean and teaching the children about it. And so then the island itself can become more aware about the plastic pollution there.
Finally, the last time we spoke 4 years ago on the podcast, we were talking about Shangri-La Home, which is, it's a home for street children in Kathmandu, Nepal. Can you give us an update on that? How is that organization doing?
They're actually doing really good. They have their own home now, and it's like an earthquake-proof place. So they're not dependent on rent anymore, because that was at first they were dependent on rent. The laws in Nepal are not that easy. The owner can easily ask more from 1 month to the other, and you don't have a lot of rights as when you rent something. So now they're more independent, and the home is actually doing really good. The children are all, they're now in some kind of confinement as well, all together, because of the COVID-19 spread. But it's still going very nice, and it's still growing, and that's a nice part. In Belgium, it's growing, the support for it as well. So every year there's getting more and more initiatives from people in Belgium to support this home, and now it's for me as well. 4 years ago that I've been physically to the home. I see the founders still from time to time, especially on their fundraising activities. But I'm looking forward to visit it again and to see with my own eyes how things are going there now.
Well, Jelle, I won't ask you what's next because of the current situation. I think you're right now in lockdown after coming back from Africa, or maybe not lockdown, but self-quarantine. And so I'll just end it with just how can people find you online if they want to learn more about you and your adventures?
They can just follow me on my website, or as well on Facebook, Instagram. It's jelleveyt.be. That's JELLVEYT. And then everything on Instagram is with this name, or they can even Google my name and they will come to the right channels, I think. So, and if people want to contact me to join a ride, no matter where, I'm always open for that, and people can always discuss it with me. So I'm always happy to have people around 1 week, 2 weeks, doesn't matter. Yeah.
Okay. Jelle Veyt, congratulations once again on completing the Carstensz Pyramid adventure. Man, what an amazing adventure. And best of luck to you on whatever you decide to do next.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. This episode was recorded on April 9th, 2020. To send feedback, you can write to me at paul@thepursuitzone.com, or you can leave me a voice message at speakpipe.com/thepursuitzone. The best way to support the podcast is to subscribe, and be sure to share this episode with your friends. For the subscription links, show notes, and more, visit thepursuitzone.com.